Sitting up now. Mama. Let's learn about it. Almost all the people.
All right, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today, inshallah, we're going to be continuing with what we started out last time, which is speaking about that rejection that the Bani Israel were actually living in, which is rejecting one, the message, two, rejecting, of course, all the different things that even the Torah was prophesizing about a coming prophet. And there were some different things where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking about Bani Israel and how they had claimed that they were really believing in Allah Almighty when what they were really believing in at one point was the calf, in other words, influenced by the different tribes or the different communities that they were surrounded by in Palestine, the people that were worshiping the idols at the time. And of course, later they had claimed that they only believe what is in the Torah, and then the Quran said, well, wait a minute, isn't that really confirming, that is the Prophet ﷺ really confirming what was revealed in the Torah? So technically you're not denying what's in the Torah. In fact, you are actually believing in what is in the Torah by believing in the Prophet ﷺ. And they also had claimed that they wanted to reject the message that was sent unto the Prophet ﷺ by considering that they did not want the message to be sent onto Jibril alayhi salam. They wanted it to be sent on Mikael because they considered that Jibril was coming in with scriptures that were going to be tough to implement. So therefore they wanted the scripture to be sent on to Mikael, who is the angel of rain. So they suspected that if it were to come to a different angel, perhaps it would be more merciful, or something that would be bringing in prosperity rather than bringing in legislature. So that's when the ayat were actually revealed in order to bring about that clarification that all the messengers and all the angels and all the different messages were actually sent by Allah Almighty, and therefore if somebody's an enemy to Jibril, he was actually sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in other words, by the permission. So the word bi-idhnillah, although it means by the permission, literally, but it actually means by the order of Allah Almighty. So bi-idhnillah, by the order of Allah Almighty, musaddiqan lima bayna yaday. So it is to confirm the prophecy that was already revealed in the past by the different in the different scriptures, whether we're talking about the Torah or whether we're talking about the Gospels. وَهُدًى وَبُشْرَى لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. It contained guidance. In other words, it is continuing the same and tracing back to the same prophethood, or the same legislature, or even the same message that was sent on to the rest of the prophets. So here, wahuda wa bushra, it is containing the same exact message that was in the Torah, that was in the Gospels, that were sent onto Prophet Isa, and definitely that was also sent onto other prophets, in where it contained huda, it contained guidance to mean in aqidah, in how one understands about God Almighty, about the future, about the past, about the purpose of life, etc. That contains aqidah. And then the second part of huda, which really is the part of applying in life, so that the implication of guidance on your behavior. وَبُشْرَى لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And again, since we're talking about the purpose of life, yesterday I went to a restaurant, and I don't know if you guys know the Iranian restaurant. I haven't gone there in a long time. That's actually my favorite restaurant. Anyhow, so I was there, and the man, I don't know, I don't know why, but he's, I know he's Shia, but that's not what Shias believe in. This is just his own. So he said, we're actually living a great life, and I said, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you Jannah. And he said, I don't want Jannah. And I said, A'udhu Billah. And of course, this isn't Shia, by the way. Shias believe in Jannah, but he just happens to be just doing his own thoughts. But then I said, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you Jannah. And he said, I don't want Jannah. And I said, La ilaha illallah, why would you not want Jannah? And he continued to keep on saying, because I'm already doing good. I don't want Jannah. And I said, La ilaha illallah, why would you not want Jannah? And he continued to say that, he doesn't want to be greedy and he's doing the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing and not for the sake of Allah or even akhirah, which is really similar to what atheists would believe in. Just do the good for the sake of good and not for Allah or for the sake of any good purpose or any Jannah, etc. But of course, in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, Huda wa bushra lil mu'mineen, to seek Jannah, to seek guidance, to seek a reward from the Lord Almighty is actually part of Islam and part of the message that was sent on to all the prophets and the messengers. To do something good in order to get the reward for Jannah is not at all reducing your iman. To do something for the sake of getting the rida, the content from the Lord Almighty, and not just for the sake of good, more of a subjective good somehow, but you're going for a rida, going for a content level, for reaching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's content over Jannah. It is also a goal that the Muslim must reach. So even want to attain. So to seek that I'm doing this to get Jannah, it is not whatsoever reducing your iman. Even wanting to get Jannah is actually something that you have to wish for. It's part of what sorry about that, everyone. It does not reduce the person's iman by seeking the rida or by seeking Jannah or by seeking a good reward or by even seeking to keep away the different evil from you. All right. Now, moving on for the ayah, من كان عدوا لله وملائكته ورسله وجبريل وميكال فإن الله عدو للكافرين. So in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is responding to the Yahud that said, we don't want Jibreel to give us the message, and instead not be happy today. It keeps on getting disconnected. من كان عدوا لله وملائكته ورسله وجبريل وميكال فإن الله عدو للكافرين. That's in order to bring about the final statement that if anybody is an enemy to Jibreel or an enemy to any of the angels or any part of the message or any part of those that hold the message, let it be the prophets or even the angels, or even if it is one angel or even more, or any of the prophets, is actually as if you're denying parts of the message. So denying part of the message is actually denying all the message. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ عَدُوٌّ لِلْكَافِرِينَ. That the Lord Almighty is actually an enemy for those that reject truth. Because once you reject any piece of the truth, that would actually mean you're rejecting all the truth, because then you're accusing that truth of containing discrepancies. So by believing that truth is containing discrepancies and of course having loopholes, and that would actually mean you just denied that it has any truth within it. وَلَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ, to continue, and of course to continue the main message, which is وَلَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا, and therefore we had revealed onto you آيات بينات. Ayat means verses, or ayat can also mean can also mean miracles. So here, ayat and bayinat, that the Lord Almighty had actually revealed clear and detailed verses on what is truth. Therefore, denying any part of the truth is actually accusing that information, those traces of information, of containing discrepancies and therefore containing lies within it. And that would actually mean that that person would become a denier of the whole truth in general. وَمَا يَكْفُرُ بِهَا إِلَّا الْفَاسِقُونَ. And the only ones to deny what biha actually goes back to the ayat and bayinat. Whoever would deny the different ayat and bayinat, the different revelations, the different detailed revelations, and denies any part of the detail of the revelation, then certainly they would actually be part of al-fasiqin. They would be part of al-fasiqin, and al-fasiq is simply when we talked about how a fruit, it would be getting separated. In other words, you're exacerbating the peel off the fruit, off the core of the fruit, and then that way you're actually letting the fruit itself rotten without the peel. So in other words, in order to preserve the fruit, you need the peel on it. And by leaving the peel, you're actually giving it a form of preservation to live longer. You're giving it a preservation in order to maintain and contain the core of it, that is the nutrients of the different things that is in a human sense. And of course, humans are very similar to the different things created in nature, is that you're containing the fitra. You're containing the instinct that human beings are created in, which is really similar when we're talking about fruit, by putting in and leaving that skin or peel on the fruit. You're giving it a longer chance of living longer and preservation. So when we're talking about staying away and a person exacerbating himself or herself away from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is exactly like how you would peel a fruit and you end up letting it get rotten by exposing it to the different contaminants that surround it. And that's the same thing with human beings. By taking away Sharia, by taking away the different legislatures of Allah Almighty, then these people are leaving themselves exposed to different contaminants that surround them, and they'll definitely start with getting their heart getting into the different contaminants, let's say it that way, with hawa, or different desires, and of course affecting the person. And when it starts affecting the core, it starts coming out into a behavior. It starts affecting the person's behavior, and of course you will not be surprised then why the person had a different behavior other than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had actually revealed from haqq. So when we look at here, وَمَا يَكْفُرُ بِهَا إِلَّا الْفَاسِقُونَ, this is in order to tell us that whoever stays away or whoever distances themselves away from the different revelations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent onto the prophets, on the messengers, they're going to get themselves exposed to the different contaminants, and of course eventually their behavior is going to be distanced away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then they're going to find themselves away from haqq, and they couldn't even see where the truth lies. So they'll end up getting into a ball of confusions in terms of understanding ethics, in terms of understanding the purpose of life, in terms of understanding who they are and what they are, and the beginning of life, and where and how they should be living their life, and then they go into a whole ball of confusion. أَوَكُلَّمَا عَاهَدُوا عَهْدًا نَبَذَهُ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ. This is still talking about the people of Bani Israel. What is it really speaking about here? أَوَكُلَّمَا عَاهَدُوا عَهْدًا نَبَذَهُ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْهُمْ. So what happened here? أَوَكُلَّمَا عَاهَدُوا عَهْدًا So every time that the Bani Israel would make a promise, would make any type of an agreement, there would be a group of people that would want to reject the agreement and take a different stance. But what agreement was this actually talking about? This is actually talking about the agreement between them and Allah Almighty when they had taken upon themselves to hold on to the message of Allah Almighty, which is the Torah. So what happened? Well, they had made that convent, in other words, by embracing the Sharia that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent unto Prophet Musa and the different prophets that later came. They basically had taken upon themselves to practice and even believe in every single verse that was sent on to Prophet Musa alayhi salam. But what happened? نبذه فريق منهم. Who was the one that let go of the truth that was sent? I want to look at this one. نبذه فريق منهم. The word نبذه means when, let's say you have a paper or you have any item in your hand. In nabd is when you have something in your hand and then you just throw it or you toss it. You throw it or you toss it. So this ayah is basically telling us they had the trace of truth. They were holding on to truth, but then they let go of that when they actually had seen that the Prophet ﷺ was a prophet of Allah Almighty, but they chose to let go of that particular piece of truth that would lead them to haqq. نبذه فريق منهم. Who was the one that actually tossed the truth and let go of it? It was actually the scholars, the rabbis of Bani Israel, making that the rabbis were actually living in more delusion than the different laymen. بل أكثرهم لا يؤمنون. In fact, the majority of them had actually been influenced with what the rabbis were claiming and how they took the stance to toss away truth, to distance themselves away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and away from what even the scriptures were telling them to believe in. And then the laymen followed their path. And this is really important because the impact of the different leaders within a society, it's not enough to say, well, it's their fault. Yes, the leaders within, let's say, New Atheism, Christianity, whether we're talking about political leaders or probably the ones to fund a group or even the ones to be in the media, the spokespeople, and all these different groups, whenever we're talking about a thought, there's a person that's going to be funding the thought, and there's also the person that is going to be explaining the thought, or at least I would say making it into a narrative. All right, so then you'll have the people that will fund the thought, and of course, all those areas will act as a whole think tank, if you would want to say, and they will act as the ones to be leaders to make the thought become and be seeming as if it contains all the different logical elements in it, and therefore it becomes this idea that passes on to the layman. And which is why when you look at this, بل أكثرهم لا يؤمنون, it doesn't mean because we're looking at the leaders, whether they were the financial, the intellectuals, whatever it is, it doesn't make the layman not accountable for following the pathway and the path of the leaders of whoever and whatever they're actually doing in order to market the thought, proselytizing the thought. And those that are responsible for passing on the thought are definitely held accountable for making that making that manipulation pass. But at the same time, those that contained it, those that followed the wronghood, are definitely going to be held accountable in the same way. So it's not enough to say, well, those are the leaders. You chose to follow these people to be the ones, to be the ones that are dictating your life for you. It doesn't mean that you are not accountable, or you are not going to be responsible for deciding that pathway. And that's why when you look at بل أكثرهم لا يؤمنون, although here نبذه فريق منهم is talking about the rabbis, is talking about the leaders within that group and how they took the stance, even though they knew and they contained the truth. In other words, they knew it, they had it in their hand, but they chose to let go of it. In other words, disregard it and let go of it. And you had بل أكثرهم لا يؤمنون. In the end, is that they took a final decision, a final stance by letting go of the truth and following those leaders. ولما جاءهم رسول من عند الله مصدق لما معهم. And when they had received the prophet that was confirming the different prophecies that had come within their scriptures. And in other words, it was mentioned in their scriptures, نَبَذَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ. A group had tossed away, had disregarded of course, part of the rabbis, part of those leaders, the part of those that contained and knew about the knowledge of the scriptures in the Torah. من الذين أوتوا الكتاب, they had the information. كتاب الله وراء ظهورهم. What did they do? They left the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that actually traces back. In other words, the truth in the Quran is to confirm, and it continues to trace back to the Torah that was revealed onto Prophet Musa alayhi salam. And then what did they do with those pieces of truth? Well, they basically نَبَذُوهُ وَرَاءَ ظُهُورِهِمْ. They basically had left it. And here, this is not to be translated literally to be put behind their backs, but this is actually more of a metaphor to say that there was right before them, it was right in front of them, but they chose to disregard it and just leave it behind. And rather than taking it as that lens that they would see in front of them and see the truth that had just come before them. In other words, the Prophet ﷺ, كأنهم لا يعلمون. And then they became as if they had not known anything about what was revealed in the Torah or what was revealed in the Quran. So both كأنهم لا يعلمون, as if they didn't know what the truth really was. And this is really important because when you actually look at the Old Testament in specifically, when you look at the Old Testament specifically, there is actually a lot of different details, or there are a lot. There are a lot of different details that speak about what's his name, Ismail alayhi salam. Ismail alayhi salam, and how Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam was ordered to take him to the land of Paran, in order to take him to the land of Mecca, and was going to be made into a great nation, and how he had the water flowing from underneath his feet, and how Allah Almighty was going from the people that would basically be the people that were basically from the descendants of Prophet Ismail alayhi salam were the Kedars, and how later they were going to be the ones to take over the message. And Kedar were basically the Arab. Different details. It would really be interesting to actually, I don't know why, but this is telling me that my internet connection is not stable, and definitely my laptop is not happy with the internet connection today. So let's continue, inshallah. It's probably the magic. All right. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. So what was the alternative that Bani Israel were following? وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ. So what happened? I want you to look back at this ayah. So the people of Bani Israel, they had rejected Jibril alayhi salam. All right. They said, it's not that they don't believe in Jibreel. No, they believe in Jibreel, but they said we don't want, in other words, further legislature. We don't want more do's and don'ts. We instead would want something to give us some kind of a prosperity and some kind of prosperity and some kind of wealth, etc. Now let's go for magic. Let's hope the magic doesn't happen on us and then turn off our internet again. واتبعوا ما تتلو الشياطين على ملك سليمان. They followed, and the word ittaba'u actually reflects that they were following whatever pieces they were looking for. What the word tabi'a actually means to trace something, but ittaba'u means to follow every single trace of something, and that's what that shadda actually does to the verb. The shadda, when it comes into the verb, so for example tasharraba, tatabba'a, etc., it can mean to engage in something, let's say deeply, and it can mean to do something gradually, and it can also mean to exaggerate something. So here, ittaba'u, based on the context, would actually mean they were trying to follow every single trace to get more and more of information about what the shayateen were actually speaking of. What were the shayateen really talking about? Ala mulki Sulaiman, on the mulk, on the different power of Prophet Sulaiman. So what does that mean? Well, there's a story behind this. The people of Bani Israel, they wanted to reject Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam's prophethood, and they regarded that Prophet Sulaiman was just a king, and that he happened to be a great king, not by the prophethood and the legislation, but he happened to be a great king because he was getting some inspirations from the devils in order to make and control people by using magic. So the people of Bani Israel, they had claimed that Prophet Sulaiman was actually a king that was, in fact, of course, this is what they had said. They had claimed that he was a king that was married to all these women. 700 women is the number that they actually put forward, and that the women, whether from Lebanon or women from Egyptian women or Palestinian women, etc., and that he was so fascinated and so what is the word that I could use? But he was infatuated when is happening. All right. Yep, it's magic, you guys. This is real. All right, so let's get back to magic. All right, so they had actually claimed. Sorry, you guys, it's my internet making magic and disconnecting on me. So ولكن الشياطين كفروا يعلمون الناس السحر. So here the ayah wanted to basically say وما كفر سليمان. In fact, Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was not a disbeliever. In fact, he was a prophet of Allah Almighty that actually had the different powers that were given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Did I read Surah Al-Baqarah? No, I was actually today at home. No, I didn't. Yeah, there you go. No, it's probably just because my laptop is in a different room, even though it's closer to the modem, but I guess it's not recognizing the distance yet. So it's not magic. Sorry, you guys, something definitely weird is happening. So Allahu musta'an. All right, so here we go. Let's continue right there. All right, so this is in order to reject what the Yahud were claiming about Prophet Sulaiman. وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانَ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا.
I think it's going on.
Or were these La ilaha illallah? Now it's disabled. This is getting too hectic for me. Okay, here we go. ولكن الشياطين كفروا يعلمون. Who was really teaching magic? And is magic real or not? ولكن الشياطين كفروا. Were these shayateen real shayateen, jinn shayateen that is, or were they human? Let's just look into the ayat in the beginning, and I want you to please bear with me because there are a number of different interpretations here. So, and I'm going to lay them out for you just so that you would recognize the different. That is not normal and it's not happy today. All right, so let's continue. So, ولكن الشياطين كفروا يعلمون الناس السحر. Now, here are a number of different questions. Number one is that when we say ولكن الشياطين كفروا, does that mean that the shayateen themselves were actually doing the magic? Or does that mean, is this speaking about shayateen themselves actually being, jinn, teaching people magic and doing this type of kufr? And when we look at وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا, or is this talking about human shayateen? Is there such a thing as human shayateen? Well, remember, is that when you look at shaitan actually means anybody that is distant away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, so anyone that is distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically a shaitan. And that's the same thing when you look at that shayateen al-insi wal-jinn, from the shayateen of the human shayateen and the jinn shayateen. So when we're looking at shayateen, it can actually mean that the shayateen were really humans. So who are the Babel, Harut, and Marut? We're going to get to that. Okay, hold on. When we look at Babel is basically the city of Babylon, and the city of Babylon, the kingdom of Babylon, was basically in Iraq. All right, it was in Iraq. And it's a very known civilization, that had many different tools. All right. You guys, this is really frustrating for me, and the internet keeps on disconnecting. So you've so far disconnected like 5 times, and it's becoming really frustrating for me. All right, let's hope this is the last time. If it disconnects, I think we'll have to redo our tafsir next week, inshallah, because if it keeps on disconnecting, it's just too hectic, and it takes away all the different focus and trying to focus on the topic. Now, okay, so when we look at magic, is magic necessarily real or not? Let's go back to a hadith, all right? I'm going to share this hadith with you, all right? This is so common that people actually ask about this hadith. So there's a hadith, and this hadith is actually in Sahih al-Bukhari. I want you to look at this one. All right. This hadith is in Sahih al-Bukhari. And what was the story about this hadith? So that the Prophet ﷺ كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يخيل إليه أنه كان يفعل شيئا وما فعل. That the Prophet ﷺ used to imagine, or he used to think that he had done something and he didn't do it. And then he made the dua, invoked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then tells his Sayyida Aisha that did you realize, that there was some type of hallucination, let's say it that way. He said, while this was happening, that is when he was not feeling well, he clearly was physically ill. And then he said, 2 men came to me. And this is talking about that angels coming to him in a form of men. One of them sat next to his head, and the other one sat next to his legs, in other words, feet. And then the first one said, what is wrong with this man? And the other one said, matboob. The word matboob actually means that he was pricked by magic. In other words, he has a spell. So then the other one said, and who was the one that did the spell? The other one responded, Labid ibn al-Asam. Now, the story here, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us about the two angels coming to him really in a form of a demonstration, in a form of a question and an answer, really in front of him in order to give him the answers to the questions of what is really happening to me. So this angel is asking a question through the question and answer. Okay, this is Labid ibn al-Asam. Okay, Labid ibn al-Asam was the person that had done the magic spell on the Prophet ﷺ. And then they said, قال في أي شيء. What did he use in order to make this magic spell? He said, قال في مشط ومشاطة, not مشاقة. في مشط ومشاطة. So مشط, it's like a pieces of hair. Some, when you comb your hair and you leave and some hair falls out, that they basically took those pieces of hair and mixed it with the pollen from a male palm tree. And then the other one said, and where is this magic spell? In other words, where was it thrown in? And he responded, Fi bi'ri Dharwan. It is in an abandoned well in Dharwan. And of course, in the land of Bani Zuraiq. The Prophet ﷺ told the number of different Sahaba to actually go and get that particular magic spell that was done. And the Prophet ﷺ had seen it. This is definitely hectic. All right. So what happened was that the Prophet ﷺ was explaining that it seemed like as if it was the color was so murky and dirty that it was as if it was henna that was soaked in water. In other words, it was murky red somehow, and it seemed like it was كأن رؤوس نخلها رؤوس الشياطين. It even looked so ugly that it was looking like as if it was shayateen. It was, it was so ugly. It was so disgusting. So the Prophet ﷺ explained that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had taken off that magic off of him by, and of course, teaching him. There's another narration letting those malaika, those angels, actually teach him how to do the ruqya by doing. So a ruqya is a spiritual, let's say it that way. It's a spiritual type of remedy in where it is. Assalamu alaikum. You guys, this is getting too hectic. I think we'll do the tafsir for this one next week. It's giving me the jinn feeling, This is just too hectic. Oh my God, this is unbelievable. This is just beyond. So what we'll do, it's really giving me exactly a unique adventure today. By the way, speaking about unique adventure, believe it or not, when I do ruqya on people, this particular ayah, when I would do ruqya on people that will really have magic in them, this ayah, it just makes these people just start as if they were getting a seizure.